You know that feeling? That intense pressure to just be a better person, to somehow fix all of your flaws through sheer willpower? Well, today, we're tackling one of the most profoundly liberating concepts in biblical theology. We're looking at the reality that true, lasting holiness, it actually originates entirely with God, not our own exhausting efforts. And we're going to explore this whole idea through an ancient covenant name of God, Yahweh Mekoddishkem. So let me just ask you right out of the gate, can you actually make yourself holy? Really think about it. Can you achieve moral perfection totally on your own? Look, human effort almost always falls short. We try to set all these strict rules for ourselves, we try so hard to be perfect, but sin, and just our human nature in general, constantly gets in the way. And this sets up the core problem of our lesson today. It's the battle between our own frantic human effort and the profound reality of divine grace. Spoiler alert here, human beings literally cannot make themselves holy apart from God. No way. All right, so here is our lesson plan for today's explainer. First, we'll be defining key biblical terms. Second, looking at the Sabbath and tabernacle. Third, exploring the process of sanctification. And fourth, wrapping up with some core spiritual lessons. Okay, kicking things off with part 1, defining key biblical terms. This is our vocabulary of holiness. Let's dive straight into this incredible covenant name of God, Yahweh Mekoddishkem. So it combines YHWH, which is the sacred covenant name of God, with the Hebrew root kadash. And kadash means to sanctify, to make holy, to consecrate, or to set apart. So when you put the whole thing together, it translates to the Lord who sanctifies you, or the Lord your sanctifier. You see, this isn't just a title, it's a profound revelation that God is the sole author of our cleansing. He is the one actively doing the work to set his people apart.
Which naturally brings us right to the word sanctification. Now, forget about self-help books for a second. Biblically speaking, sanctification is defined as being set apart from sin and completely dedicated to God. And because sin fundamentally corrupts humanity, sanctification absolutely requires divine action. It's God turning us away from idolatry and rebellion and actively preparing us for worship and for his divine purposes.
And that leads us to holiness. There is a really important distinction I want to make here. Holiness is not merely moral improvement. I know we so often equate holiness with just following a strict list of rules, right? But the actual Hebrew idea means being sacred, pure, and entirely devoted to God. God alone is perfectly holy. He's absolute purity. So our holiness is highly relational. It means we belong to God, and because of that relationship, we actually begin to reflect his perfectly pure character to the world around us.
Moving right along to part 2, the Sabbath and tabernacle. These were the signs of the original covenant.
Check out this really foundational verse from Exodus chapter 31, verse 13. God tells Moses, "Above all, you shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you." This is actually where the name Yahweh Mekoddishkem shows up for the very first time. And notice exactly who is doing the work here. God explicitly states, "I, the Lord, sanctify you." Israel's holiness didn't originate from their own righteousness. Not at all. God sanctified them simply by choosing them and redeeming them. The really crucial point here is that the Sabbath wasn't just some rigid, boring restriction. It was a profound symbol. Taking a literal day of rest symbolized a covenant relationship. It proved their trust in God. It showed they could truly rest in his provision, and it culturally separated them from all the surrounding nations. It was this weekly, physical reminder that they belonged entirely to Yahweh Mekoddishkem. And you see this concept permeating their entire society, especially within the tabernacle system. Literally everything associated with worship had to be totally consecrated. The priests, they needed intense cleansing just to enter God's presence. The altar and the tabernacle itself were dedicated strictly to God. And the sacrifices were this constant, very visual reminder of humanity's desperate need for atonement and purification. Because God is completely holy, sinful humanity cannot just casually approach him. All right, part 3, the process of sanctification. We're moving from Old Testament symbol to New Testament reality. So the bridge between the Old and New Testament is really understanding the core problem here. And it's perfectly summarized in Isaiah 59:2. Your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God. Sin creates this impassable gap. Those Old Testament animal sacrifices we were just looking at, they only symbolized a temporary purification. They were always pointing forward to the fact that humanity desperately needed a much greater, final solution to permanently fix this massive separation. And here is that final solution. Hebrews 10:10 declares, "We have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all." Jesus Christ is the ultimate fulfillment of Yahweh Mekoddishkem. Jesus lived the perfectly holy life that we literally couldn't, and he offered himself as the final sacrifice. He accomplishes permanently what those Old Testament sacrifices could only symbolize. Through him, sin is forgiven once and for all, and God's people are finally truly made holy. Now, this is where it gets incredibly practical for us today. Biblically, sanctification actually has two distinct aspects. On one hand, we have positional sanctification. Because of Christ's sacrifice, the very moment you have faith, you are officially declared holy before God. It's a completely finished work. You are washed. But, on the other hand, we have progressive sanctification. Even though you're declared holy, you know as well as I do that we still live in a broken world, and we still struggle with sin. So you're called to grow in holiness daily. It is an ongoing transformation where God is continually shaping you to reflect his character more and more every single day. So, how does that progressive daily transformation actually happen? Well, it's the ongoing work of the Holy Spirit. The Spirit works within believers to, first, convict us of sin when we inevitably go astray. Second, to actively produce holiness within us. Third, to renew our minds, literally changing the way we think. And fourth, to develop deep, godly character over the course of a lifetime. This isn't just a one-and-done event, guys. This is a lifelong process of being molded into the likeness of Christ. And that brings us to our final section, Part 4, Core Spiritual Lessons. This is all about taking it with you. If you take away absolutely anything from our time today, let it be these 5 core truths of Yahweh Mekoddishkem. Number 1, God alone makes people holy. It originates entirely from his grace, not our frantic effort. Number 2, God calls his people to be completely set apart from the patterns of the world. Number 3, sanctification is a beautiful paradox. It's an instant declaration of holiness, but also a lifelong ongoing transformation. Number 4, Jesus Christ's sacrifice is the sole source that makes true cleansing even possible. And finally, number 5, the Holy Spirit is the one actively producing this character inside of you every single day. The really incredible promise of the Bible is that the work Yahweh Mekoddishkem begins in you, he will absolutely, ultimately complete. I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. If God is the one who sanctifies you, how is the Holy Spirit progressively shaping your character today? Take a real moment to reflect on that. Stop relying on your own exhausting willpower. Look for where the Spirit is convicting, renewing, and guiding you right now. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack the profound truth of Yahweh Mekoddishkem, and I will see you in the next explainer.